Welcome to Osh After the Bell podcast, where we bring you a fun and informative conversation about everything outside school hours care and give a voice to our fellow educators. So buckle up.
Welcome to Osh After the Bell podcast, people. I'm joined here with Barbi from Firefly HR, and today we have an exciting guest, Hamza. Hamza, my friend,
Hey.
Hamza Khan. How are we doing, Hamza?
We are doing fantastic. Even better
Fantastic.
that we get to make this connection with some
We are
wonderful people
excited.
down under.
Thank you. I would like to introduce to those who are listening to who Hamza is and what Hamza is up to. Now, I'm actually, right before this podcast started, I was confused as to how would I introduce Hamza, who has done so much in his life. And I thought, why not I just read something which Hamza's website says. So here I go. And Hamza Khan is a multi-award winning marketer and entrepreneur. He's managing director of Student Life Network, Canada's most comprehensive resource hub, dedicated to helping and empowering millions of students across the country. Wow, Hamza. He has also co-founded both Splash Effect and a boutique marketing and a creative agency, as well as Skills Camp, a soft skills training company. The list goes on. He's also an instructor of Seneca College and, correct me if I'm wrong here, Ryerson? Did I say it right? Hamza?
Almost there. Ryerson.
Ryerson University.
Rye like the beverage.
Rye like the beverage. Okay. Teaching courses on digital marketing and social media. Okay, good. And he's a consult. He consults, he writes, he teaches, he speaks. Hamza empowers people and businesses to transform the idea into action. I am a fan of Hamza. I've been listening to Hamza's YouTube TEDx talks since morning. Thank you, Hamza, for being here. And thank you, Barbi, for organizing this, because Barbi sourced you out. So I'm really lucky to be in the company of you two right now. So welcome,
Likewise.
Hamza. Welcome to Osh After the Bell.
Thank you both for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I always say I've been a long time stalker, but no, follower of what you've been putting out on LinkedIn for a while, and especially the lead up to this book. You had a lot coming out. And I think I even touched base because I'm like, oh man, can I get this in Australia? I can. Could get it pretty quickly, actually. And just all your content is just so relatable to what we do in out of school hours care. So that's why I thought I would reach out, not only to your newest book, which is Leadership Reinvented, but I haven't read yet your previous book, The Burnout Gamble. Both The Burnout Gamble and Leadership Reinvented, burnout and leadership are both two big issues in out of school hours care in USH.
Wow.
So this is why I reached out to Hamza to see if he'll have a chat with us, to see if he can help
Barbi,
on our journey.
That is incredibly validating to hear. I'm reminded of a quote by Pablo Picasso, of all people, who said, "The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away." And I think I've been lucky with the help of a lot of mentors, and not just people that have walked the path before me, but even my mentees. And I hope we can get into that a little bit too, about just the nature, the very sort of amorphous, nebulous nature of mentorship, the changing definition of mentorship. I've been very lucky to have, I think, found my gift. And so the evidence of being brought on this podcast, of you, Saurubh, watching my talks, and Barbi following me on LinkedIn, I think that to me is all the validation that I need this morning, that we have people thousands of miles away that are enabling me to give away my gift. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart.
We are so glad. This is what happened, Hamza, when you said yes. Barbi contacted me and said, well, guess what happened? Like, what happened? Like, he said yes. Like, oh, that's amazing. Well, we're gonna have a podcast. And then she says the time in Australia is going to be 10 p.m. So those who are listening in Australia, we're recording this on 10 p.m. Tuesday? Is it Tuesday? Tuesday night? Yeah, Tuesday night.
And I feel terrible. I feel Barbi, I'm taking you away from your lovely pug and your even lovelier daughter. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. She's asleep and he's asleep.
We are very happy to have you here. And as you mentioned something about right before we started recording this, Hamza was talking to us about his Australian connection. That is, he has been to affiliated with, if I'm not wrong, University in Newcastle. Hamza, yourself?
Yeah, the University of Newcastle story was really interesting to me. So in 2015, I delivered one of the TED Talks that you might have seen, Saurabh, Stop Managing, Start Leading. And at the
Yes.
time, I was full of fire. I was ready to sort of declare and put this idea out there that the traditional style of management was either dead or on its way out. And it was very well received at the time. I mean, I'm talking about being this, upstart millennial, this maverick standing on stage telling the world like, hey, the old paradigm is over. We're ushering in a new way of doing things. The Theory X style of management, according to Douglas McGregor, which assumes that people are lazy and unmotivated and they need prodding and prompting and micromanaging, that's out. And we're bringing in this new era in which people are self-motivated. They mean well, they're hardworking, entrepreneurial, et cetera, et cetera. That message resounded very well with us, the three of us, who are speaking, our age group, if you will, and I imagine many of the Osh listeners.
Yes.
And it was received not so well by some of my older counterparts. Yeah, Barbie. And I actually mentioned that early in the book.
Yeah.
I say that I was actually summoned to my boss's office. And, shout out to my boss. My boss understood the message, but said, regardless, the optics weren't great. And that perhaps it would be in my best interest politically to apologize to those who were offended by my message. And I was stubborn. I believed at the time very strongly in the message. And I said, no, I'm not going to, but I'll sort of smooth it over in other ways. Anyways, flash forward to 2019. And I'm at this point in my life really starting to doubt what it was that I put out there, because I'm seeing sort of ebbs and flows in the paradigms of the old management style, the traditional management style, and the new one. And I'm not quite sure if my message is resonating or if it was valid to begin with. And this is something that I think is just characteristic of me. I think I've always been plagued with self-doubt, imposter syndrome. And, I've often wondered, I mean, even right now in this moment, I'm like, who am I to speak to your audience? I mean,
really?
God damn it. Saurabh, you're pursuing your PhD here, and I just started my master's program. So I feel, that I was at the peak of Mount Stupid, and then I fell all the way down into the valley of despair for following that Dunning-Kruger effect model, if you will. Anyways, wrapping this story up, the TEDx talk starts going viral very slowly. And I think at this point in its evolution, it's at 1.2 million views, with most of the traffic coming from all over the world. And I get a message in my inbox from somebody that y'all might know, James Hunt of the University of Newcastle, an MBA instructor. And he says to me, your video was recommended to me by one of my colleagues, who's now a friend of mine, Nikki Strahan. And he said, I watched this and I think it is the top 3 best TED Talks on leadership. And I was like, what? James, first of all, get I have serious questions about your credibility, James, if you think this is top 3, man. And he's like, no, this is even better than Simon Sinek's Start With Why talk. And I'm like, oh, hold on, James, you're off your rocker, James. Have you had something to drink? There's no way. And then he actually broke it down for me, and he explained why this talk was, succinct. The ideas were ahead of their time, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I would love the opportunity, Hamza, if you ever came around to Newcastle, to speak to my students. And it just so happened that at the time I was being called by the Australian Psychological APS, Australian Psychological Society. I think that's correct. I could be wrong. I apologize if I got that abbreviation wrong. They had called me down to QUT for a leadership conference. And I'm like, hey, it just so happens, James, that in 2 months, I'm going to be down there. I would be more than happy to hop a flight over to Newcastle and do this. And my friends, what happened is he organized an event for me. And it was such a unique event. And I spoke about it recently on another podcast, I believe. There was no opener. There was no closer. It was not part of a series. It wasn't, billed as something other than Hamza Khan is coming from Toronto to speak about leadership. So what happened for me in that moment is the gravity of the challenge made me deliver one of my best talks. And I went there and suddenly I rekindled that spark. I was like, wow, we have an auditorium. I think it was a church, actually. Reminded me of Hogwarts a little bit, of 200 people, most of whom I would say, if not all, were way more educated and more qualified than I was. And so I decided I have to bring it, and I have to believe in that message I delivered back in 2015 with even more conviction. And I did the talk, and it resounded very well with the audience. And what it did for me is it inspired me to pick up on this thread that I was at risk of abandoning over some time, which is why, Barbie, when you showed the book, you see at the beginning, it says, thank you for the call to adventure to James and Nikki and to the young leaders of Newcastle, Australia. All of y'all down there inspired me, re-inspired me to pick up where I left off. So thank you. That was my Newcastle connection. I'm sorry that story went on a little bit longer, but I wanted to give the audience some context about what that connection was.
It is so special. Like, and that's what it is, isn't it? Like these small moments where people have no idea sometimes the social awareness or the lack of it, perhaps, where we are making impact in people's life and we don't even know that. And let it be positive, if it may be.
And Saurabh, there was 100%. There was no need for Nikki to recommend that video to James. There was no need for James to extend that invitation to me, let alone slide in my DMs. And so to me, that was such a profound gesture. They didn't have to do that, but they took time out of their day to make that known to me. And something as small as that has then led me to write this book and to re-engage with the subject in a way that hopefully I'm spreading those ideas out to other people who may be touched by them, including hopefully maybe the two of you and hopefully many of your listeners. So, you know, this idea has been traveling through time. If we're taking a cosmic lens in this idea has been traveling through time, through the eons, if you will, but it's only now manifesting in this particular interaction.
Well, even in what we do in Ush, like many of us, we work in the industry to work with children. We get limited or none or hardly any training on leadership. I know with Saurabh and I, we both started in teaching in primary. There's no leadership training in our courses. And I don't know about you, Saurabh, but I was suddenly running a service and managing maybe 20 people at the time. I had no clue what I was doing. So it's almost like seeking out where to learn this information to keep, so we can do our jobs better. And then again, share this information with others. I even quickly had a look here at the diploma for school aged care. It's called Early Childhood Education. Both of them have about 25 or 28 units, and each of them only have one small unit on leadership called Lead the Work Team. Hasn't been updated since 2015. Wow. So what's changed in the last 6 years? So I'm sure, and I even had a quick look at the content, like what they have to put out for it. It wasn't much, and that's just an idea of what's going people on in the industry are getting. It's not much. So they are looking for places like this for more information to people like you that write well on it and talk well on it. I think you make it very relatable in how you do talk about it, Hamza. I don't know if you noticed.
Thank you. I try my best. And I think perhaps, I find myself overcompensating for my lack of academic pedigree in the subject. And so what I do is I tend to be very prosaic, and I tend to rely and lean heavily on my background in English literature, communication, marketing, to try and make a product that is accessible to people. But that's such a travesty to learn, Barbie, that, in what was it, 28 units? There was
25 or 28.
25.
Yeah, each course one has 25, one has 28, and both only have one unit, and they're both the same units called Lead the Work Team, and haven't been updated since 2015. So,
and this is so sad, and I think this is evidence of an idea that I touched upon very early in the book, Leadership Reinvented, which is that the definition of leadership has been in flux since the start, but it has been changing quite dramatically in the last 20 years. The old definition of leadership, or if you trace the etymology far back enough, it's usually associated with a king, a chieftain, a ruler, somebody at the head of a tribe, if you will. And I think that idea has been traveling across time and has sort of been wrapped up in a military context. And then as it entered into the industrial age, if you will, it became associated with CEOs and titular leadership. Leaders have titles, leaders look a certain way, they speak a certain way, they have the corner office, they conduct themselves in a manner that we then associate as leader-like. But in the last 20 years, that definition has changed to now be widely accepted as that which elicits voluntary followership. And as two primary school educators, you were in the classrooms. What is the role of a teacher? The role of a teacher is to elicit voluntary followership. You can't force sometimes you got to force the kids, let's be honest. But most of the time you have to earn their trust. You have to engage them. You have to convince them that why they're there is a worthwhile investment of their time, energy, and attention, and then guide them to become better versions of themselves. My goodness, if that is not what a leader does on a daily basis, or if what a leader is supposed to do, then I don't know what is. you are leaders, whether you like it or not, my friends.
And that is amazing, because I don't think people see themselves as leaders.
No.
No.
Because they identify, people take actions based on how they identify themselves as. One may call it self-concepts or conceptualizing themselves or self-worth or whatever that may be. But if you identify yourself as a teacher, and then suddenly you think, oh, I'm just a teacher, or you may say, I'm just a coordinator, or I'm just a director, or I'm just a casual staff worker. As soon as you identify yourself to one thing, you have automatically not identifying yourself to the other thing. And I think we always lead, as you said, that classroom teachers, yes, of course, but Barbie and I have been working for like what, 10 to 13 years now with kids. And I often say that children
20.
are never distracted. Children are
Yeah.
only attracted to something else. If you really want children to be attracted to you, be good enough, just dance around to
100%.
make sure that they attract. And that's what I love how you said, the voluntarily that they follow us. And it is happening everywhere. Even if somebody's working for the first time in a daycare or after school care, that person is leading a group of kids. But I'm not sure if we see it that way. And therefore, how you mentioned that leaders are out there somewhere, sitting in the corner office, like wear differently, dress differently, talk differently. I think that's
Right.
that there's a gulf in between in any
Massive.
workforce, but at least especially in ours. Yeah.
Yeah, and to that end, I am honing in on this idea that I think, at least North American free market capitalist society is fundamentally broken. And this is not a novel idea. This is being felt widely. In fact, it's being reflected at the Business Roundtable. And so this is where you have leaders of major corporations get together every year. And I think in 2019, they sat around and they said, well, the system's not working. We have to reinvent business. And in doing so, we have to reinvent leadership. And running a business is no longer just about delivering shareholder value. It's about improving the communities. It's about improving the lives of the people we serve. It's about improving our surroundings. And so in this way, the leader has to become quite selfless. They have to diminish themselves. They have to dissolve into the fabric of their organization and their society. And their job has to be about making everyone around them better. But you see now, what's happened during the COVID-19 pandemic is you have this sort of obscene growth and this gulf that you alluded to earlier that's been widening. You see people like Elon Musk, for instance, or Jeff Bezos accrue obscene amounts of wealth, leaving the rest of the world in their wake. And so to me, that's evidence that the system, the old system, has worked quite effectively. But if it has produced this remainder that is upset, that is confused, that is experiencing the volatility, uncertainty, and complexity and ambiguity of our day and age, then what's the point? And if I had to restructure society, if they made me the world czar, if you will, if they made me the king, I think the first thing that I would do, honestly, is overhaul our global education infrastructure. I would make teachers, I would make your jobs, my job to a certain extent, I'm a post-secondary instructor, I would make them the highest paid jobs in society. I would make the competition to become a teacher really, really, really high. I would want people to clamor for these jobs and, for children to dream that one day I want to become a teacher, because I think this is the engine that moves society forward. The work that you do by design is future work. You show up every day as teachers, you teach these children, but you're not teaching them in 2021. You're really teaching the citizens of 2045. You're teaching the citizens of 2078. The work that you do will have a dramatic impact, a profound impact on our future. And I think that we've just got it ass backwards.
We have,
society,
it seems like. I was just having a chat with a leader in Sydney just before this. It was late night, but we still had a chat.
I know who you're talking to. They messaged me. Yeah,
she messaged you. Okay.
Yeah.
Like that's
so
Saurabh.
She messaged me too. And I was like, I'm in Brisbane. I'm looking at the text, and I replied a couple of times, and then she replied a couple of times. And I thought, you know what? She would not have contacted me if she didn't want to talk to me. So I just called her while I was still getting ready for this podcast, and I had a chat. And the at times, Hamza, what do you think when people who are in leadership position but may consider not consider themselves as that I'm leading something, or what happens? Is it like self-worth? Is it to do with how we haven't identified them? Perhaps we haven't given them that ownership, or we haven't, as Barbie pointed out, we haven't even academically shown them some theories on it, or perhaps books on it. What happens? Like, is the people are left guessing?
Yeah. There's a lot over here, and I risk sort of, just going on this long rant, and so I have to, think about how to organize this answer.
Okay.
I'll split it up into two parts. So I think the first thing that happens is in society, specifically within organizations, that especially the ones that are subscribed to the traditional paradigm of leadership, which isn't really leadership, it's management at best.
Yeah.
There exists this catch-22, and the catch-22 is that new leaders must have leadership experience. Right? But how are you supposed to get leadership experience in advance of a leadership appointment? And what happens as a result of this is that whoever has traditionally occupied leadership positions, and let's be frank, right? If you look at, just open up and just go to see who the CEOs of all the Fortune 500 companies are, you're probably going to see straight white men. Let's just be honest, right? When they talk about cultural fit, they'll tend to hire other leaders who emulate their behaviors, who emulate their leadership style, if you will. And so you feel more comfortable hiring somebody that looks like you, that probably has the same memberships to the same clubs and associations as you do, who probably was part of the same fraternity, who speaks the same way, et cetera, et cetera. So what does that do? That tends to neglect and that tends to marginalize even further women, people of color, and the LGBTQIA plus community.
Right.
But if there's anything that we've learned in this recent transformation of leadership and sort of this sort of fraying of the fabric of society, is that a lack of diversity, especially in the upper echelons of an organization, often corresponds to blind spots, organizational blind spots, which then lead to organization failure and the failure to make transformations that are essential for the renewal of organizations. So in order to break that catch-22, I think that what responsible leaders should do is, first of all, examine their unconscious bias, understand that they're contributing to a catch-22, and then perform leadership trials. And I wrote about this quite extensively in the book. I said that there should be a system in which people are told that they are leaders. And so you activate that part of their brain for them. You say, whether you like it or not, you are a leader. You are a leader of a project, you're a leader of an event, you're a leader of a process. And then you equip them with the time, the energy, the resources to be able to focus on expanding those leadership capabilities, whether they're engaging in, sessions that you might have spoken at and delivered through the work that you do at Firefly HR. So they sort of learn more about the practice of leadership, the theories, the conceptual frameworks behind it. And then they get to apply their leadership styles, apply their leadership skills so that they can enter into a new virtuous cycle, which is I am a burgeoning leader. I'm experimenting and I'm learning about leadership and I'm practicing leadership, reflecting on that experience and becoming better. And then what happens is gradually over time, you see in these boardrooms, you see in these organizations, there are more women, more people of color, more members of the LGBTQIA plus community. And we diversify our organizations, and not just diversity of those three vectors of intersectionality. I'm talking about diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of perspective, diversity of experience, which more often than not corresponds with diversity of people. So that's the first part of my answer. The second part, and I'm very, very new to this, I'm beginning to formulate my research focus, my topic, if you will, for my master's program. And it's unsettling, to say the least. I've tried to bridge, or I'm trying to bridge my first book, The Burnout Gamble, with my new book, Leadership Reinvented, to try and explain this burnout paradox, if you will. And the burnout paradox is, if we're at a place right now in society where the volume and the intensity around the conversation of self-care and burnout and wellness has reached a deafening level. If everybody knows that you have to do yoga and meditate and practice mindfulness, if you've read The Burnout Gamble and 50,000 other books about, beating burnout, would it not naturally follow that levels of burnout and overwhelm and stress would decrease over time? You would think so, right? Logically, the more awareness, the more adoption, the solution should be people are not burning out as much.
Yes.
Except, my friends, one peek under the hood has revealed quite the opposite. that levels of burnout and stress and overwhelm have not just increased, they've exponentially increased, which has led me to ask the tough question of, if it's not being addressed, if we can't solve it at the level of the subordinate of the individual, what role does the leader play in the well-being of their people? And so far, it has led me to unearth a pretty nefarious model known as the dark triad of leadership, which is three subclinical traits: psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. And it just so happens that those leadership traits have not only been rewarded in past epochs of leadership, but they're still very much alive and well, and unfortunately invisible amongst the current cadre of leadership. All of this is to say that I believe that there is, unfortunately, some bad actors. When I say some, I'm holding my tongue. Many bad actors in the current makeup of our leadership who are self-interested, who want to perpetuate their leadership. This idea of absolute leadership corrupts absolutely. But here's the kicker: they actually don't care about the people that they lead. They don't see them as people. They see them as human resources. They see them as expendable. And in fact, many organizations have built into their business model attrition. They bring you in young, they burn you out, and they show you the door. And they just keep that revolving door of talent going because nobody has challenged them. But I feel like now, having gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, this awareness has developed among society where we're looking at the system. And going back to an earlier point I made, I think we can clearly point to examples of where the infrastructure has cracks, where it's potentially going to collapse. And I think we need to take a closer look at this dark triad leadership. So sorry, that was a bit of a long answer. I promise you for the future ones, I will keep them succinct. You guys ask great questions. I can't help it.
That is such a, like, I wrote so many things out of that.
Yeah, so do I. I've got a whole page going.
Oh, wow.
The thing is, as I said earlier, Barbie would always be the most studious one. Like, I mean, she teaches me, she can take me to school any day in terms of,
I've actually got learning difficulties. So for me, processing things is writing. So when you say something, even when I read in your book, an idea might just go through. But when I like rewrite it or something, I don't know, it just cements better. So I'm used to it.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
With your first point too, so there's something we do in USH, we may not realize that can link to how we think about our own leadership, is we have a program that we have to do with the children. And we heavily look at a program cycle and how that works and improving it. So it's kind of like a cycle of life thing, but with programs. So make sure we're reinventing it, we're improving. We also have to critically reflect a lot. But I don't know how much we even think, like I've drawn a little diagram of a leadership cycle. Like, do we even look at our own leadership and see where we can improve and then trial that and test that, like you mentioned, and then go back and look on how that went and then improve on that and keep going and critically reflect on our own leadership of what we're doing. For anyone that was listening that wonders how they're going to do it, we do it already ourselves with other things in our service. It's just investing that time probably in our own leadership, or even if you're leading others. And like say, I managed a large team just before, because I've got a little one, just before I left for maternity leave. And within our team, there's probably about 30, 32, and we had 8 leaders and probably 5 core leaders. So I guess for me at the top, I was trying to, those 5 core ones, give them that kind of leadership cycle, give them those things to test and run with, come back, see how it worked, keep going, keep building. Almost, I guess, if I drew this, it would be like a pinwheel that grows out and out and out. Like as you try something, you're developing and adding on and building your skills. And so forth. Sorry, I've just totally lost my train of thought.
No, this is good. Like, I actually have a question about this, right? So is the abbreviation OSH out of school hours childcare?
Just the care.
Yeah.
Outside school hours care.
Out of school hours care.
Yeah.
Right?
So
like school would presuppose like students, right?
Yes.
So this is basically all the learning and development that happens outside of traditional school hours.
Yeah.
This includes parenting. This includes co-curricular, extracurricular activities. You know, this is quite holistic, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's based on play and leisure from in Australian context. So every country has, not every country, but countries have different ways of looking at it. So if you look at Asian countries, Hamza, outside school hour care would look like tuition classes. So it was more academically driven. If you look at
Right.
America, they have academic plus the extracurricular. Whereas
Sure.
when Australia was looking at it, Australia just made it play and leisure. So how we define play is willingness. So if a child wants to do the homework, then that child is willing to do the homework. So that becomes his or her play. If the child is playing, sitting down and watching trees, that is his play or her play. So as educators, what we are doing is we are facilitating play. We're not making them play because we set up basketball, so he or she has to play the basketball, because then that becomes the leadership which we don't want, but it becomes
Right.
more of a dictatorship, which is more like an academic model where a teacher decides what to teach. Whereas in after school care, we don't have a curriculum to achieve rather, but just a curriculum to see, okay, what have they done today? And that's what Barbie's saying, that when kids have done something or are doing something, we sit there and we go, that child learned this today or that today, or how can I facilitate this learning more in the future? Which we do with children so much with love and care. And I wonder if we do, as Barbie's mentioned, about our leadership skills, are like, oh, what did I do right today? Or what can I do more tomorrow? And where am I going in the next 3 months? I wonder if that happens.
And even like, I think we should think a lot more on how did we make people feel like as a leader too.
Right.
Be a bit more conscious on that. Sorry, I just thought that as you were talking.
No, this is so cool, right? Because my partner and I, we don't have children yet, but we talk quite a bit about sort of starting a family and what that would look like. And it gets a little nerdy at times because we're both educators and both trainers. So we talk a lot about sort of our pedagogical philosophies and how we would approach child rearing. And, we sometimes, find ourselves at, having different opinions about this, talking about simulating constraints for our children. But also, what would it look like if we just left their growth open-ended? What if we didn't place these activities in the buckets of leisure and tuition, if you will, right? What if we just sort of made it this life curriculum and it wasn't segmented in terms of school or within school or outside of school? What if we just sort of created this choose your own adventure approach to their world? And then we sometimes go down that path and we're like, yeah, but then how would that explain if this child ends up on the other side of 25, realizing that they don't have the skills to participate meaningfully in the economy of tomorrow? And that guidance can only come through parents who have that intentionality and who have that knowledge. And so maybe there has to be a balance where you put them in those classes, you give them the skills, but if you see that, they're being pushed negatively or they're overwhelmed in whatever those classes may be, whether it's STEM tuition or it's learning life skills, survival skills, if they're not responding positively to it, do you then use that as an indication to weave them off of that? We say this now, but I imagine, Saurabh, and correct me if I'm wrong, do you have any children of your own right now?
No, I don't. I have a Chihuahua cross Pomeranian. Yeah, that's right.
That's a child.
That's a child to a certain extent, right? But I suppose, Barbie, like even in your situation, like somebody who understands fundamentally human skills through the work that you do, Firefly HR, as an educator, I would imagine, based on the conversations I've had with other parents, that the rule books go out the window when there's a little one crying.
Yeah, especially with us. She's barely been sleeping for a month and we've just been doing everything we know that's wrong. Like everything you're not meant to do, because she's, oh man. And I have to admit too, I'm pretty much a helicopter parent, even though I know in my practice as an educator, you've got to let them do.
Yeah.
And one thing that's kind of helped me stop, it was kind of the good and the bad. I had to have surgery at the end of last year and get my gallbladder out, and I couldn't pick her up for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
But in that time, she developed so much. So she ended up actually learning how to walk in that phase. Whereas I think if I was going about my usual helicopter parenting style, that wouldn't have happened. She would have still been delayed on walking. Even just how she can climb and move and get things herself improved dramatically. I couldn't believe it. And so when I'm talking about this age range, this was when she was 11 months. Not 11 months, 13 months, that she just developed so much in that time. And I think it was because I just literally couldn't pick her up and do for her. She had to do for herself. But the development was yeah, I think I needed that
That's
reminder. I know
Oh,
that.
yeah. No, I hear that. That's so fascinating, right? Like we have all of these plans, and I often wonder, like, why are we still writing books about parenting in 2021? It's because we haven't figured it out, right? Like we're gonna keep on writing books about parenting all the
Yeah.
way until the very end, because there's this thing that's constantly working in the background, which is 10,000 years of human evolution and all of its nuances, where the
Yeah.
code was within your daughter to
Yeah.
learn how to walk in the absence of her mother holding her for those 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So cool, so fascinating to see
Yeah.
that sort of like epigenetical thing take place.
And
It's
and
exactly that. Like the amount of things she's doing that we haven't taught her, which is just seems to be right for the age and the stage she's at. She's just doing. Like it's just there.
Wow.
It's ingrained in them. It's
Wow.
amazing.
and to
So-
Hamza, one of the things I would love to add here, and as you're thinking of starting a family, and you had this, there's the philosophical paradigm differences. Like these are three different paradigms, which I'm going to mention now. For as you're thinking about children and what skill are we preparing them for the future, and that's the question we have in the course I teach, philosophy. That's the question we leave our students with. And there are three philosophical paradigms we talk to them. So I'm going to write these three in an email just so that you don't have to copy it. But
Yeah, please.
for those who are listening, Dewey's work on vocational training, Plato's work on academic training, and then Jacques Rousseau on humanism. And it shows you how, from the history of Dewey's work, Dewey is also an academic and humanist, but Dewey also talks about vocational training, of how a carpenter's son was always a carpenter.
Yes.
So the society worked that way. It was nothing wrong with that, and nobody questioned anything. And then comes the Plato with academic thinking. We need to give them something abstract. We need to give them something to make this society a bit more just, because now we can fight for injustice. And then, but it was, again, it has limitations because not everybody could afford academia. Even today, people can't afford academics many times. And then comes this Jacques Rousseau with his humanism and says, you know what, leave them alone, leave them free. Every child has its own beauty, and let them learn through exploration. And then my students are meant to come up with an answer to which one of this or the combination will prepare students for future generation. And if they do mix it, remember that we are mixing two philosophies, so there will be tension between the two. So that could be the tension between husband and wife sometimes,
Right.
So, but some of my students who write way better than I do, and you know who you are, that they compose this theoretical, of course, theoretical. As Barbi said, she had ideas, but hey, the things didn't work out that way. But theoretically, they write it so well, as if we could just follow that, every child would be so happy. And it's a combination of these three. So I'll write these three things down, and I'll send it to you, so as an outside thing.
And Saurabh, a question for you, like chronologically, did they develop in sequence or simultaneously? Like I imagine Plato's was first, right? The academic approach was then followed by Dewey and then followed by humanism? Or
so Dewey mentions after Plato, but he mentions about the history of it, and it's only an interpretation anyways. So and yes, so you would say Dewey, and then you would say Plato, Dewey, and Jacques Rousseau. That's how you will follow that.
So this is interesting, right? Because then it leaves, if we understand that each of these was informed by either intentionally or not by the previous model, then that leaves space for the introduction of a new model or an addendum, if you will, to this evolution. And I'm curious to know, like, where do both of you see this going?
So
what innovations are you seeing at the forefront? You guys are the tip of the spear when it comes to this work. What are you seeing?
We have new things coming. We have Montessori, we have Reggio Emilia's work on. We have things coming up, but I can see in outside school art care, we are really focused on humanism. That is learning through exploration, because exploration is a voluntary. That's why I keep coming back to that word you used in the past. Voluntarily, if a child is choosing an activity, and it's not. I'm reading a book from Peter Gray, and he talks about how for some reason the acquisition of knowledge, for those who have knowledge, they feel that a child is a blank slate, and that we need to give this knowledge to the child, and therefore this knowledge is unquestionable to an impressionable child, and therefore the child has no defense against that knowledge. So that means I can teach you anything, and you will learn, and you'll believe that the sun is the moon and the moon is the sun. Like, he didn't say that exact word, but I'm just adding it. Whereas the new one is co-construction of knowledge. Whereas I would see you as an active part of learning process, and then perhaps you can question the things I've said, and then perhaps only get convinced if I am able to convince you. So I believe in co-construction of knowledge, absolutely, because there is so much we don't know yet. So who are we to say that in a lifetime of, let's say, 70, 80 years, the first 20 years, I'm going to tell you what you should know.
Right.
And then I'm like, but what about all the things we haven't known yet? So the child and you can co-create that knowledge together. So that's like a really amazing couple of pages, which perhaps we can add to this end of this podcast as well. But it's an amazing book, which on amazing research on how learning should occur. Yeah.
I feel like our show notes are going to be just, several scrolls deep over here with all these models and books. Great recommendation. I want to follow up on that, but after Barbie, like, what are you seeing from your perspective? Like, are you seeing similar to what Saurabh's seeing? Are you seeing something else? What sort of innovations are happening in this space? I'm very curious to know.
I'd like to see more of what Saurabh's seeing, but I don't know if I am. Always seeing that, like I think that's the best way moving forward, and will be. Yeah, I have no idea, actually.
Yeah, this is, I'm terrified, right? Because I feel like what's happening with this, I get it. Like this generation, I have a cousin that is living in India right now who should be in school, but is learning virtually. The teachers are burned out. They're phoning it in. He has nowhere to go, nowhere to play. He lives in a very busy area. This is a place called Baikala, India. His name is I have 3 cousins over there, but I'm thinking about the youngest one, Zaid, who, because of COVID, can't even play with his friends, and there's not much greenery and, randomness to explore around him. So I wonder about sort of developmentally what's going to happen to him moving forward. Right now, he's retreating more and more into using his devices. And this, to me, is a challenge, because Google's mandate is to index the world's information we're essentially outsourcing exploration. We're outsourcing discovery to the cloud. And so if we're thinking about this humanistic approach to rearing children and raising children, if all of their questions can be answered easily with voice commands and easy typing, then what wonder is left in the world?
Yeah.
What questions can be asked? What sort of free-flowing pathways can be taken if there is a regimented approach to your life that is outside of the socializing agent of teacher and parent? If we're introducing the internet as a 4th socializing agent, in addition to teachers, friends, and family, I feel like we're powerless because those devices, this guy right over here hijacks the limbic system. Way more compelling than listening to me, watching the two of you, bells, whistles, lights, I fear for the future of this lockdown generation, but just the future of future generations in general, because I don't know if something's going to be lost. I think as parents find themselves more overwhelmed, it becomes easier and easier for them to tell their children, hey, just take this phone, take this laptop, take this tablet, and go away, go figure it out.
Yeah, I have to admit, we had a professor of cognitive neuroscience on a podcast a couple ago, and it was great for me as a parent to talk to him, because he talked about the effects of device uses on children. And even now, because he's teaching in university, that's the generation that have just grown up always having a device, and just how
what were his conclusions, Barbie? Like, what did he
resilience is kind of disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah. So
as a result of the devices?
Yeah, because I'm mind blanking right now, but mainly because it's nearly 11 p.m.
It's nearly 11. You're way past your bedtime. I'm sorry.
I don't know if Sarah remembers more than me, but it was just nearly everything he said. Like, I know straight away. So we never give our daughter a device at all. Her grandparents do. So that's where she gets it. It's odd. It's the older generation that give it to her, but it's made us really think. My husband's also listened to the episode of what it can affect its eyesight, actually. Sorry, now I'm remembering as I'm talking. A lot need glasses, especially if they've given a device before too, because it changes. Their eyes need to focus on things from all different
perception changes.
Yeah. Whereas if they're always looking at a device, it's just where it gets fixed.
And also writing. Writing and the message which it gives to your brain while you're writing. I feel that forget about kids. Let's look at ourselves. Because of mobile phones or tablets and instant gratification.
I was thinking that.
If you're looking at a video and you know that a joke is on the 3rd minute, you go straight to 2 minutes 59 seconds. So you don't even listen to, I say you, I shouldn't. Just
No, we're there.
I'm like, okay, let's just forward it to right to that moment. And I'm like, early, like let's say 20 years ago, we didn't have a remote control for the television, right? But I grew up in India. My parents had a remote control called me. Like, Saurabh, do this. I have to go and do that.
Go and twist the knobs, man.
Twist the knobs and then go up on the terrace and then just change the antenna when the cricket game is going on and all that.
Yep.
So at that time, it was okay to wait it out, listen to the thing. And if the news channel was so slow, it was so slow, and we would just sit there, listen to it. And then we'll share a couple of thoughts. And nowadays, like, it's on there, you forward it, you rewind it. It's just so, we have become so controlling in terms of what goes in our mind, and we pick and choose.
I think about this all the time. Honestly, I'm obsessed with this this investigation into where this is going, right? Because Saurabh, like yourself, I too have these sort of like nostalgia. I had this nostalgia for a time before my limbic system was hijacked by Mark Zuckerberg, right?
Yeah.
I do see there being positive attributes that are shared across our generation, if you will. But at the same time, I can also see for Barbie's daughter, how this could also be a positive, because it accelerates learning, ease of access to information, perhaps even greater empathy as a result of being connected to more people early on. But there's also, it's not without its downside. So maybe a balanced approach is necessary. Yeah. But I wonder, Barbie, like in you making the decision with your partner to not give your daughter devices now, will that be considered a educational handicap when she reaches a certain grade? When other parents are just like, hey, all our kids are device literate. Yeah. They all know how to use the latest iPhone 35, whatever.
Yeah, no, I think it's all percentage, like how you use it and what for. Like, say if you are somewhere and you need her to wait for 10 minutes, I don't think it's a good idea to be like, here, have this, so you don't complain. Like, this is where that they've just got to learn. They won't learn if they're always given a device in those moments where they just got to learn to be patient. Sorry, I was looking for my word before. Patience was the word I was looking for. Oh man, when I wake up at 5 a.m, that's why all these words are disappearing at 11 p.m.
You're doing really well, Barbie, for 11 o'clock.
Oh, you're great.
And it's just,
brilliant.
Like I said, it's like a when to use it and what for. And sometimes as a parent too, like, watch out how much we use it as our own crutch. Like, all right, I really just need 10 minutes. Here you go. You have this. And how we use our own devices too. Are we always on our devices? This is also what he touched on, is if we don't sit at the dinner table and eat with them, or if we do and we're on our phone whilst they're eating, what are they learning there? Like, there's a lot of communication skills that are missing now as well. So it's not even just how they're using it, it's how we're using it in front of them. Right.
And modeling that behavior.
Yeah.
So therefore, I have a question for Hamza, and this question is kind of a question which you asked Barbie, but then I thought it gave me another question. So when you asked Barbie about Haley using this thing, of phones or tablets for that matter, how I also saw that these phones, yes, they can give empathy because they're connected to so many people straight away. On the contrary, sometimes it makes them very much self-centered and individual in their own learning, so rather than a collectivist learning. Now, and these two words gave me a different question, perhaps. do you reckon that people who grew up this way, and in our sector of education, we have leaders who are 50, 55, 60 years old, and they're coordinators, directors, but we also have leaders who are 21, 22. Do you think that these two leadership skills, styles, perhaps those ones who are like 21, I was, when I listened to your podcast, like YouTube, and you said at the age of 21, I was helping a person who was much wiser, much older than me. And I thought, what was I doing at 21? Oh yeah, I was coordinating with school and I was finding my way. So, so we have these leaders, right? So at the age of 21, 22, I'm just putting it out there. I'm arguing perhaps that they have been quite individualistic in their learning, which is a good thing because they know more about themselves and self-care, self-worth, self-concept, uh, uh, self-realization, look after yourself first before you help the world. And all those self thing came in, which we never heard in collectivist period. Like we thought our nation, our world, our life, our family, our community, and now we hear self.
Yep.
Do you think that there's a different, like, do you reckon that those who are there are pros and cons in their leadership also, because they might not perhaps understand 5 different perspectives because they were like so much occupied in their own learning, perhaps? Or is it like combination of it? Like,
that's a great question. That's a great question. I'm still very early in this exploration.
Right.
And so we're looking at sort of subclinical narcissism as one of the dark triad traits. And this is the pesky one for me too, because it's easy for people to point to Machiavellianism and psychopathy and say those are bad qualities and they harm everybody else around them. But in the 5 studies that I've been sort of pouring through and trying to reconcile, narcissism usually correlates positively to other people's growth and to their happiness and to their well-being in the organization. So I wonder if maybe there's something, very basic happening over here. Okay. It's, the ego and manifesting itself through the narcissistic behavior or just self-centeredness, this idea of the individual. Perhaps it could be reframed as the survival instinct of the individual playing out in a way. Okay. And I think the survival instinct to find equilibrium in the organization and bring people along with them. Or maybe I'm being too rosy in my interpretation of this. Yeah. With that being said, though, I would have to say theoretically, the collectivist idea is a better idea in terms of creating equitable outcomes for as many people as possible. So while in small ways, the individualistic approach to leadership might benefit the individual, raise their profile and awareness, help their small cadre of people, maybe even, right now, as we're seeing the echo or maybe a second or third wave entrepreneurial boom, this idea of the flashy leader, if you will, the great exhilarator, the personal brand, you hear that a lot on LinkedIn, develop your personal brand. Yeah. Maybe that works for only a certain period of organizational growth. Right. Maybe that helps with the introduction of an organization and the growth of an organization. But when it comes to the stability, the maturation, and then the renewal at a structural level for an organization, that's where maybe a more blended approach is required, or one that errs on the side more so of a collectivist approach. And I see this too in my evolution as a leader. Like first of all, I don't like any of my recordings. I don't like the sound of my voice. I don't like seeing myself. And so I've watched my TEDx talk maybe once and I was cringing the whole time because I'm like, oh my God, like I was so young and so egotistical and I could sense the narcissism, right? And now when I think of myself as a leader, I'm trying to do quite the opposite. I'm trying to be in the background. I'm trying to be behind my people, trying to nudge them and push them to the forefront, trying to encourage them. And I think that comes through age. I think that comes through the wisdom accumulated through going through multiple cycles of leadership, but also recognizing that there's diminishing returns to me prioritizing myself above my team now. It'll help me as Hamza. Like if I decide to sort of be the leader that I was back in the day, I would be the leader that takes the credit for everybody else's work and sort of goes and stands up on stages and passes off their ideas as my own and sort of takes this narcissistic approach to like, I did this, see everything over here that's happening at Student Life Network, that's me. Right. I'm trying to do quite the opposite now. I'm trying to say, well, I'm just here to coach. I'm just here to push people outside of their comfort zone, help them learn new skills. It wasn't me, it was David. It wasn't me, it was Amanda. It wasn't me, it was Samantha, Connor, et cetera, et cetera. but I'm still going through that experiment right now. So we'll have to circle back maybe in 2 or 3 years and
that would
find
be
out how it works.
I would love
but
to
I think
know
I think
this.
that's how. Oh yeah, for sure. And but you know what? I think I know the answer, right? And you think about who some of the greatest leaders are in the world, and I wrote about many of them in my book, Leadership Reinvented. My favorite example is Jacinda Ardern, somebody just a hop, skip, and a jump away from you, who I think is the most effective leader on the planet right now. Now, an argument could be made that, with the amount of media appearances that Jacinda is engaged in, that she's a bit of a narcissist, and maybe that's the case. But I think if you look at the track record, it's very clear that she has a great deal of empathy. That might be her superpower. Right. She wants to connect. She wants to help. She wants to look after the best interest of not just New Zealand, but the immediate community around her. Right. And I reckon that she's trying to make everybody around her better. She's trying to leave New Zealand in a better place than in which she found it. And I think in order for that to happen, that requires dissolving your ego, benching your ego, as one of the subjects in my book describes. Phil Jackson, bench the ego. And Phil Jackson is interesting, right? Because I'm not sure how big basketball is down in Australia. We have a couple of great Australian basketball players. I think we have one on the Toronto Raptors right now, Aaron Baines.
All I know is like this guy called LeBron James.
LeBron James.
Right. Did I say it right?
No, you got it right. You got it right. So Phil Jackson in his book 11 Rings talks about, and this is a legendary coach. This is a team that has won back-to-back twice championship. So he has a total of 6 rings across 2 teams, if not more. But I'm thinking about like the 3-peat Chicago Bulls and 3-peat Los Angeles Lakers. The common denominator was that he recognized that his role wasn't to be the player. His role was to be the coach. He was not on the court playing basketball. He was on the sidelines. His job was to make sure that all of his players were self-actualized, that his players were able to compete at a high level, and that he was able to harmonize them. And I think, to me, when I think about a very sort of simple reduction of these grand concepts of leadership, it comes back to that relationship between Phil Jackson and his team.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, I think something similar to that in the video, but I want to also take this opportunity to say, when I was listening to your video, you did not come across narcissist at all.
No, not at all.
Oh, wow.
I have to admit, I'm surprised to hear that.
You were articulated in your thoughts. You were clear. And for those who have not, we will be putting links of and also if you look at the comments on YouTube were like brilliant about how what they found. One comment was, I like every line he said, everything you said. So it was, you did not, but it's okay for you to think that way. That's fine. But you didn't come across at all that way. In fact, on the contrary, when you talked about a point, you actually also referenced where you got those things from, also the people who inspired you. So I thought even in that there was several hints of you not saying that I have this, but I have actually learned from this book, I got this from this book, that from that book. And you also mentioned in somewhere that when my student, or when the people I'm coaching, if they become wiser than me, then I show them a different course that they can start following. So how you occurred to me was someone who see, you have evolved, as you say, like we all are evolving. That's amazing. But even in that moment, these are the things I got from it, that you were actually standing behind your people also, even in that moment, and perhaps forwarding, like pushing them to self-realize. And I think that's one of the things I would like to say to the people I meet in my life when they listen to you or to this video, is that that's the leadership thing which I learned from you today, that the difference between coach and a player, and that help them self-actualize. And I was like drawing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I don't think you realize how many people you can help with just your words. So for myself, listening to the Burnout Gamble, I wish I listened to it back when it came out.
Wow. She said that to me in a text.
Yeah.
I wish
because there was a few things you said in it that I never thought about, which resonated quite a lot. Sorry, I've totally changed because
no, this is great.
This is going the other side of what happens in USH is burnout. We are doing so much without much support or training, or just suddenly have to do it all, and we try, and we just burn out. But you mentioned something like, I never thought about burning out more than once. And you talked about your experience, say at university, that high achieving type burnout. And I never really thought about it. Like I always say I burnt out in 2016, But I actually think I was doing a similar thing of what you were doing in
Yeah.
the after school, my uni space. Because when I was studying too, I was full-time carer of my grandmother. I had 5 jobs to get by. My time was just unbelievably crazy. And I never even thought of, I probably even just burnt out back there. And it was kind of a cycle. As soon as I went to a workplace, no more university, when I was no longer the care of my grandma. But it's almost like I filled my role with that nonstop. I think, and you mentioned too, like linking it with self-doubt. So
Yeah.
almost because I had that self-doubt, I was constantly trying to keep achieving more and more and more. And even when you get to here, it's not good enough. It suddenly feels down
No.
here. You got to keep going and going and going. And I have to admit, I've never thought of it like that. Like I just thought it was something that just happened to me, and obviously with a build up and I always describe it as 2016, but I think it's been a thing that's been there for a long time. um,
Wow.
Yeah, so Hamza, you did not occur
There's a
to
lot
us
here.
at all.
yeah,
Like you're listening to your own recording from our perception, and it's like a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
Hamza altogether.
Well, let me try to sort of blend these two ideas together.
Yeah,
First of all, like I'm
please.
having sort of like almost an out of body experience listening to this. I've been tinkering with this notion that imposter syndrome isn't intrinsic, right? It's not
Okay.
something that I'm not misinterpreting the world. And if anything, I think it's a little bit of gaslighting. I'm being told by society, by leaders and mentors that I'm not enough, that I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I'm existing in structures that are leading me to believe, that are falsely leading me to believe that I don't deserve a seat at the table, that I'm not a leader, that I'm not this and that. And maybe
Right.
I've misinterpreted some of those negative interactions as Hamza's too narcissistic, Hamza's too egotistical, based on false feedback that I've received in the past. And what that has done for me then, Barbie, is it sent me down the path to burnout. So when you think about burnout, it's either you are burned out or you're not burned out. It's those two super states, but burnout is a gradient. I mean, during COVID-19, we've all been burning out. Whether or not we've burned out completely is another conversation, but every human being on the planet has been flirting with or has actually been further along the burnout cycle than they think. So, I mean, my goodness, thank you for holding up that mirror to me and reminding me that, I've got a pure heart. I've got a clear consciousness. I do want to genuinely help people. And
Yeah.
maybe, just maybe, in my formative years as a leader, as a person, whether it was, something that maybe happened during parenting or in my earlier days as a leader or some negative feedback that I got from a client or whatnot, I've falsely believed that I'm not good enough. I've falsely believed that I'm not worthy. I've falsely believed that I'm too this or I'm too that. But it comes back to the word that Barbie slipped in there, enough. What does enough look like for me? What does enough look like for Hamza? What does enough look like for his portfolio of work? How do I want to be remembered when all of this is said and done? When I'm
Right.
6 feet deep and I have my friends and family around me, when I have people writing eulogies and delivering eulogies for me, what are the key phrases, the words, the attributes that I want in that?
Right.
And why am I chasing anything else? Isn't the whole purpose of life to sync up your resume with your eulogy?
And that's beautiful. Thank you, Bobby, for also mentioning those things, because I've been the way I hear you, or I've been hearing you, is someone with that pure heart. And as you said, that the negative feedback, for those who are listening, those who are leaders, and we've already established that we all are leaders, and we are leading different teams, we are leading children, we're leading our staff. That here's Hamza's reflection of someone who has already spoken at TEDx and in 2015, and looking back at it and still having those doubts and still having those negative feedback from parents, peers, colleagues, bosses, because that's what we are facing, our friends are facing on the field.
And Saurabh, this is almost full circle, right? It comes back to the role of educators. How much better would society be if the educators who experience some sort of trauma and harm didn't pass that on to their students and didn't sort of, hurt other people because they were hurt? What if instead it was just positive reinforcement? It was just,
Right.
showering people with adulation and encouragement and guiding them in a direction that helps them become the most self-actualized, best version of themselves. And I think for the most part, the record shows 80% of my life was filled with that feedback, but the 20% of it was filled with, some people who were hurt, some people who were experiencing their own challenges, who chose in moments of difficult feedback to pass on their trauma to me, to pass on their biases, to pass on their negative feedback unwarranted to me. And it became my own. And those then over time translated into the self-limiting beliefs, and the listeners and the viewers have seen sort of my wheels turn in this conversation, where I'm now starting to doubt that my interpretation of myself as egotistical and narcissistic might have been false this entire time.
That's just a story.
That's so fascinating. I thank you for that. That's something I'm going to reflect on.
I would say that's just like for us, it was just a story, because if you didn't tell us, it wouldn't have occurred us to that way. And
wow.
Even in the past, when you have when you sat here and you started this conversation, you mentioned something about qualification, and I've thought, if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known. Qualification is like, this is how I was talking to Carly Brenly, one of the mentors I really like to follow, and she's the director of the RTO of QCAN, Queensland Children Activity Network, and she and I were having a chat, and we're talking about qualification, because qualification of staff members in New South Wales, where Barbie is from, is different than Queensland.
We don't have any.
We don't have any.
Wow.
Yeah, we don't.
So I said to Carly that sometimes when people get that piece of paper, they call themselves qualified. But then if you really look at the word qualified, like, are you qualified to work with that kid? Paper doesn't tell you that.
No.
Like, I'm not talking about the academic qualification. I'm just asking, are you qualified to fix my plumbing?
Yeah.
Are you qualified to fix the wheel? Are you qualified to look after a kid? That's
right.
I don't think if a paper can say that. And Hamza, when I listen to you and your life experiences and your reflection, you mentioned something about this 20% feedback, and how I see that, people sometimes pass it on subconsciously, perhaps, or they might have not been self-aware of the impact they have on the people around them. And I have done that many times in my life. In 2010, I have some memories of that I've done something wrong, like, oh, shouldn't have done that. But I consider myself spiritual, and I was listening to my spiritual guru on a YouTube, Sadhguru, and as I was listening to him, he says, more hurt you had in the past, more wiser you should get. Like, you look at a wound as a wisdom, you look at a past hurt as a wisdom or a wound. Like, it's your choice. And more you were hurt, I would hope that the educators who have had terrible past, that they actually become more humble, wiser because of that past, because of the exact same thing, which could have flipped them the other dimension. And Barbie has been very vocal about her childhood, and myself including, and I think because of that we want to do this for the kids. So when you mentioned,
I love that, Saurabh.
When you finish that Sadhguru, actually not my idea, I'm not that smart.
Sadhguru.
When you mentioned something about qualification, I felt like, wow, this guy is sitting here telling me about and those people who are listening, before this podcast started, Hamza had already researched Osh and Oosh. He knew that there are two ways to say this thing. So it's if humble is not the word, then I don't know how I would have defined you.
Oh man, thank you. That means a lot to me, and I'm getting emotional over here. I might start crying on the podcast. Wow, thank you.
Let's record that.
No. It'll make for a great clip, right?
Yes.
It's so interesting, right? Whenever you meet people who are successful in whatever way we define success, it's usually undergirded by some sort of adversity they've had to overcome. And in order to overcome adversity, you have to experience failures in order to understand the scope of the challenge that needs to be overcome. What if we as a society started to reward failure as opposed to punish it? You think about even just the traditional job search, the job hunting process. You're sat down in a room across from a recruiter, and the recruiter asks you, so tell me about why you're great for this role. Tell me about all of the wins. Tell me about your victories. And maybe there's like a question about, tell me about a time when you failed. Tell me about a time this, that. But if we look at your resume and we see a gap, the traditional recruiter says, oh my goodness, what happened over here? Oh, you got fired from this job? Uh-oh, persona non grata, we can't hire you. But what if we change the dialogue? What if we change the paradigm and said, okay, so you got fired from this job. Do you know why? And then how have you evolved from that experience? Like, what did you learn? How are you conducting and moving yourself differently through the world as a result of that negative experience, of that failure? What if we, as a society, started to reframe failure differently? And we saw it,
Right.
to your point, and to Sadhguru's point, Saurabh, as a precursor to wisdom, as a precursor to growth.
Yeah.
How much better would society be? I wonder.
Yeah, exactly. And like, leader is someone who diminishes himself or themselves. Like, that's something which I've quoted from you.
And my boss literally said it. One of my first bosses said, "A leader makes themselves obsolete."
Yes,
And
exactly.
Alan told me this on the first day of my job. I was like, "What? I just got hired, man. What are you telling me to do?" He's like, "Yeah, I want you, Hamza, in a year to write yourself out of this job." And I was like, "What? That doesn't make any sense." He says, "Well, think about it. The same processes that are involved in moving on up in the organization are the same ones involved in making yourself obsolete. You document the process, you hire the right people, you work efficiently, you work effectively, and you pass on the learnings and you distribute your knowledge across the team." And I said, "Well, what's going to happen when I become obsolete? Like, you're not going to need me anymore." He's like, no, you will have, as a byproduct of your planned obsolescence, created a new role for yourself. You would have created a more senior leadership role. People will see that and say, "Hey, Hamza did this for this team. Let's bring him onto that team. Can he, as a traveler, touch that team and touch that team?" And before you know it, you're the senior leader. So I think people just need to take an abundance mindset versus a deficit mindset when it comes to leadership. You don't lose anything by giving away power. You don't lose anything by making other people better. In fact, you only gain. You only gain in a karmic way.
Thanks for sharing all the vulnerabilities, Hamza. Like, for those, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, leaders, be vulnerable. Give it away. Give it away. Stand behind them. Help
You
them
guys make it very
self-actualize.
easy. Thank you.
And be vulnerable. It's okay. It's okay to understand, feel whatever you want to feel, but what you're feeling and your actions are, yes, mostly they are aligned with each other, but they don't necessarily have to be. You can feel that I am not good enough, and yet you can say, I'm standing for you. You can still say that. You can still do it. And then, Hamza, when you talked about the timeline of how you might have felt, or what you were going through in those times, especially when you came to Newcastle, or right before that, in Newcastle, what your boss told you and how you had to smooth your answers down, and perhaps like have to recalibrate what you said in your own sweet manner, tells me that there are different stages you went through. But throughout those stages, you still kept leading, though. So your internal dialogue must have impacted the outside, must have manifested in a way in your actions. But
it was hard, man. It was hard. It was hard to disregard the feedback and the opinions of people that, in hindsight, were less happy than I was. I didn't actually have my best interests at heart, and only focus on the people who believed in me, only focus on the people who wanted the best for me. And that was hard. That was hard for me to do, as I imagine it is for anybody that's in a toxic relationship, whether it's with their partner or with their boss. It's hard, given that power differential, to not take what they have to say to you seriously.
I think that's important for us to remember too, because I was quite bad at doing that myself. You can have 1,000 good comments, and as soon as I had one not great, that's all I would focus on.
Yeah, man.
And I know there's many of us out there, and especially with a lot of us, say I had a lot of families that use my service, 400 families, that's 800 parents. You just need one to say something, and it makes you question everything you do, even though the others love it. So I think I don't even know. It's almost like a bit of, again, that self-doubt.
Yeah.
If we know what we do is good and kind of believe in that, and like you said, it's that person's point of view and it's what they think in that moment, it doesn't mean that's true and what's actually happening.
And I love that, Barbie, right? Because I think, we as human beings are hardwired to be change and stress resistant. We don't want to change. We don't want to experience stress. I mean, look at y'all, like it's almost midnight over there and we're doing this podcast, and, it's early in the morning over here. It's 9:21. And, we started the day at my end, and you're ending the day with this conversation. We were going into the unknown. We were going to explore our ideas, our brains together and these concepts together. And, there was a small part of me that wanted to message you and be like, hey, can we reschedule this? Or I don't think this can work. And I don't know if I have anything to add to Usha After the Bell. Maybe I'm not the right fit for this. I was finding reasons to talk myself out of it. And then I quickly snapped out of that. I'm like, hey, those are not your voices. Those are not your ideas. Other people have led you to believe that you have nothing valuable to add to this conversation. Instead of talking yourself out of it, Hamza, talk yourself into it. And I said, hold on, let me talk myself into it. I do want to talk to Saurabh. I do want to talk to Barbie. I do have something to say about education, about leadership, about burnout. I'm going to assume that they want to talk to me instead of assuming that they're just bringing on another guest for the sake of it. I rewrote my internal narrative. Literally in my journals in the lead up to this, I was writing every single day reasons why I should do this instead of not do it. And that was enough to sort of change my disposition today. And hopefully, I've brought my A game. I've given you both something to think about. Yes. I know you've given me a lot to think about, and hopefully this has been good for the listeners.
Yes. You know what you have given us? You have given us you. And that is
Thank you.
What is, see, this is what, there are 5 things I wrote down. I was on 4th and I'm thinking, I need 5. And you said something and I'm like,
you're OCD just like me. You need a nice prime number.
I don't know if I'm like developing OCD now. So I wrote, it is okay. And thanks you, Barbie, for contributing to this, because this is what I was writing. It is okay to have self-doubt. It is okay to have wounds from your past. It is okay to be vulnerable, and it is perfectly okay to fail. And what Hamza would do is rewrite the narrative, and these voices they, as you said, stress. These voices are going to convince us that we are just not enough. And thank you, Barbie, for bringing that one as well. But your action determines your character in that moment. What you just did, Hamza, when you have actually told us you've given us you've told us what you were thinking, how you were going through, because our leaders wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They get up 6:30 in the morning to the school, sometimes 6 o'clock. There are 180 kids, 80 kids, 85 kids, and there are staff members. I'm a collectivist, I'm 50 years old. There is a individualistic who is 21 years old. Oh my God, how do I manage that? And all of this generation gap, as you say, Generation X versus Y. And Barbie and I was thinking, what generation are we from? Because we had no idea. So we just found out. So we're like, oh, let's find out. I was born in 85, you were born in. So our leaders are going through all of this. And they have this voice. Why am I getting up at 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
They woke up during COVID-19 times. Yeah. Schools were shut, but they went. And they ran the society. In Australia, when everything was shut, after school care was still open with childcare.
Yes. Yep.
So they ran the society, and they have this doubt. And thank you, Hamza, for telling us the exact narrative which was going on in Toronto and Canada, and you said
around the world, yeah.
But then I looked at the book and said there are reasons why I should be here. And yes, a message to all the leaders: we want you. We want you. It's not you're not one of the. We want you to be there. And Hamza, we really wanted you to come and. We want to listen to you. So, and thank you.
And I hope this has been a great conversation. I'm very grateful to the both of you. And I hope, when I get my podcast back up and running, I'm taking a bit of a nice hiatus. I would love to have you both on and sort of shift the dynamic and ask as many questions to you both as you've asked of me. And you've given me a platform to share many ideas today. And I hope that, the big takeaway, if anything, that the guests are taking away from this is that whether or not they have thought of themselves in the past as leaders, they are leaders, whether they know it or not. Yes. It doesn't depend on society bestowing a title on them. It's not about having the highest salary in the company. It's not about having the most lofty title. It's not about having, a track record of leadership. They have leadership skills innate within them that they're realizing and manifesting every single day. And, both of you are educators, both of you are thought leaders, both of you are in and around the HR profession. Both better than anyone else that leadership skills are just human skills.
Thank you. Yes.
Leadership skills are human skills, and we've productized them through the evolution of our society, and we've made them seem like they're out of reach, that they only belong to the C-suite, they only belong to managers and directors. But the truth is, whether you're an intern or even if you're a child, you have leadership skills, and it's time to reclaim that.
Thank you, Hamza. Thank you very much. And I couldn't have ended it any better. We couldn't have ended this better. So this is, I would like to end at a peak. This is a really nice, wise words you've said. So I'm not going to ruin it by saying anything from my mouth. So thank you very much, Hamza, for joining us. We will write down the links for people to follow you on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook.
Yep.
Also, the book, which Barbi has already bought.
Yes.
Barbi, would you like to read the title of the book?
Leadership Reinvented.
Reinvented. How did you get that, Barbi?
Booktopia in Australia.
Booktopia. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, it's local. You get it straight away. So
fantastic. Okay. I usually go with Amazon with things, but I'll try the Booktopia thing as well. So, and by the way, I forgot to mention, 2017, your book was on one of the bestsellers. So thank you.
That was a wild time for me, man. And even with this book right now, it's still charting, and it's on the first page of the search results, at least on Amazon, for leadership, which is a very competitive search term. And it's alongside books that have shaped me as a leader, that continue to shape me as a leader. So it's surreal to see my little baby, just maybe 55 days old at the time of this recording, out there in the world, thousands of miles away. In order for me to see that book right now, I realized that I would have to traverse a 24-hour journey to see that book. So thank you, Barbi. Thank you, Saurabh, for bringing that up. If you do pick up a copy of the book, whether it's at a local retailer or an online service, however you choose to get it, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it serves you well as a modern leader. And if you like it, leave a nice, a generous review for me. That would go a long way.
Yes. And I'm sure that people will like it, Hamza. And when they listen to you in a podcast like this and YouTube, they will just see you in it. Your voice will come out. We'll be reading those words for us.
Thank you.
From Osh, After the Bell podcast at 29 p.m. on Tuesday. Please support us. Barbi, thank you very much for being here. Haley must be asleep. Thank you, James, for helping in the background as well. And I'll go and pick up my chihuahua from my friend's house. So because otherwise he would have barked at this late in the night and I couldn't have recorded. So support us through liking our page, Osh After the Bell podcast, Firefly HR, Barbi's coming up with new things, and of course, We Belong Education. And Hamza, thank you very much.
Thank you both.
We love you. Australia loves you.
Likewise. Have a good night, y'all.
As soon as we open the borders, please, let's go to Newcastle together.
Let's do it. Let's have that pizza you were talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Look after yourself, people.
Take care.